deserves to go down for that. A couple other things to talk about. I wanted to hit on immigration today. I talked to someone last night or the night before who I'm friends with, an older gentleman who's lived all over the world, and he's actually a legal immigrant to this country. And got to talking about politics, and he happens to be someone who loves this country like I do. He thinks it's the greatest country. And really respects this country and is happy to be a legal immigrant and a full-fledged citizen now of this country. And we just were talking about his process and some of his political beliefs. He is very similar to me in that if I had to sum up my political beliefs, as I said in my last video, it would be my the lens in which I try to view most political situations. Now, granted, it's not super simplistic. Every situation can be nuanced, but the area I start from is the virtue of personal responsibility. And so that enables you to look at a law and be like, well, you know, what laws should be passed regarding, for example, drug legalization and things of that nature? Well, because I'm looking at it through the virtue of personal responsibility, I'm saying, look, basically, we should have the freedom to put things in our body if we want until we hurt other people, right? So that influences why I think that like marijuana should be legal and things of that nature. This guy felt very similarly, and we're talking. I didn't know he was an immigrant. I just assumed he was. I knew he'd lived all over the world, but I thought he was a U.S. citizen and then moved around all over the world and then came back. That's what I thought. He asked me in the middle of we're talking about politics. He's like, well, what do you? He was talking about the caravan and things of that nature, and he's like, well, what do you think of legal immigration? And I was like, I really don't get, like, a legal immigrant has every right to this country that I have, right? Once you're here legally, once our system says that you're a legal citizen of this country, that's it. It doesn't matter if it's because you were born here or because you busted your butt to get here legally, you know. And he's explaining me the process. It took him 8 years. You have to take a difficult test. They basically interview all the people in your life to make sure that you don't have like nefarious intents to the country or allegiance to another country. You have to renounce allegiance to any other country or leaders from other countries, things of that nature. And he was very proud to be able to say, like, yeah, I did all that because I love this country. And he was happy to know that, like, I was like, yeah, you're just as American as me. And ironically, like, you have to ask yourself, I haven't seen this question asked as expressively in the United States as I've seen in the UK. If anyone from the UK is watching here, the three of you. I'm talking like 5,000 people are watching, but whatever. You'll see this question. They have like shows called Question Time and things like that in the UK, and they'll ask like a question. I kind of like it, though it definitely can devolve into not a constructive debate, but regardless, I do like it. And so I've seen many of them where it'll be like, what is Britishness? You know, what is that as a value, right? You don't hear that, what is American? What does it mean to be an American, right? And with that, when they're asking that question, what is Britishness? It's because the implication is there has to be something that brings the country together, right? So in the UK, they're asking, what does it mean to be part of the United Kingdom? What does it mean to be British? What are the values of the British, right? Well, we need to ask that question in the United States as well, right? Because, like, again, you hear this mantra of diversity is our strength, right? Again, I've said it over and over in all my videos. I don't care about your skin color, your sexual preference, your religion, your gender, your ability, your height, your weight, your facial hair. None of it makes a difference, right? Like your thoughts, your opinions, who you are as an individual. That's what people should be concerned with. That's what I'm concerned with, right? And so because we have people, you know, most countries were set up where you basically had like an overwhelming population of people that were all from the same background. And so that's what made the country, right? You know, different tribes. One tribe basically controls this whole country, and then maybe there's a spattering of other people in there. Well, we don't have that, right, in this country, and that was never the idea, right? And that's where the white nationalists get it wrong, right? They're like, well, we need a country for white people. You know what? Maybe that's true. I happen to disagree, but not this country. You know, go somewhere else. Set your country up elsewhere. That's not what this country's about. This is a country for Americans. That could be any race, gender, etc., right? But we still need something to bring us all together. So I think that the idea, like some universal ideas that make us American, are the idea of personal responsibility, the idea of, which is an extension of individuality, right? British common law and the foundation of the United States, to me, the idea was you were responsible for, you had this entrepreneurial like spirit of the West and things of that nature, where it was like, you bust your butt, you can make it here. You know, no matter what, we don't care who your family was. We don't care what your religion was. You come here, you work hard, you could make it. Right now, cynical people will say like, yeah, but the country's no longer like that. In an extent, not. But I think that it's more like that than we let on. I'm not saying you'll be Bill Gates or you'll become a super wealthy person, but you could succeed here far better and have a far better quality of life than you could in many other countries. One person I listen to sometimes, I disagree with some of the stuff they say, but is Dinesh D'Souza, who's kind of this Republican person. He makes all these movies and things like that. He comes from India, and he was talking about like, look, there was a certain caste system of India because based on who his family was and things of that nature and corruption of local politicians and things, you could have never broken a barrier to get beyond basically just living in poverty. The middle class is so important in this country, like that, and that's the idea of individuality, the focus on the individual rather than on the collective, personal liberty, things of that nature, and hard work. I think those are the values that make us American. That's what diversity is, right? You do what you want as home. We're all individuals, but we all relish that individuality and the focus on the individual and the idea of hard work and the idea of the American spirit being that we all collectively are together based on those ideals, right? The religion doesn't matter. The race doesn't matter, you know. The sport team you cheer for doesn't matter. That, to me, is what it means to be American. And we need to have something that brings us together, right? Or what are we? Then all of a sudden you start to split up. And this was something the Founding Fathers were worried about with the states, right? It used to be you didn't consider yourself an American. You were a Pennsylvanian or a Virginian, right? You were your statehood first, and we realized that we needed to be united as a country, and it was particularly important back then for reasons militaristically, economically, things of that nature, to compete with other countries in the world. We had to be able to come together as a country. Now, having a brief aside, I am a big supporter of federalism and state rights. I do think that the Founding Fathers were right to understand that we weren't just one big country. We were a collection of states that was one big country, right? And that states' rights are very important. But I digress. So anyways, this person I'm talking to that's a legal immigrant, they relish the exact same values that I'm talking about, right? So why wouldn't, like, what does it matter if they were born here or not? I don't care at all. And he was happy to hear that was my take on it. And I did a video on this. You can check it out if you want. It was probably a couple months ago. Some of the best people I would consider the best Americans I've ever met are legal immigrants, right? There are people that you see working like 18 hours a day. They always have a smile on their face. They're happy to be here. They know more about the history of the country than probably me and most people that were born here and things of that. Like, that's a true American. I don't care that they have a thick accent or that their skin color doesn't look like mine or, you know, they have some different religion than me. None of that matters, right? They're American. That's what brings us together, right? That's like when we say diversity is our strength, it is, but you have to have something that brings you together, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of my spiel on immigration. And this guy, you know, this guy I was talking to, a really smart guy, really interesting guy. I hope maybe someday to have him on the channel. But yeah, he was talking about how, you know, as an immigrant, he is very upset about illegal immigration, as I expected, and I've heard other tales of, because, you know, if you did everything the right way at great expense to you at many years, and a lot of hard work going into it, and then you see people come and they're competing with your job because they just decided to walk across a river or across a border, like, that's offensive. That's upsetting. And the other thing is, a lot of these people don't share those ideals, right? That you see people waving the flag of the country they're coming from, or they're burning the American flag, or they're cursing the American political system of things of that nature. They're here for economic reasons, right? Like, they want the welfare programs that we have or entitlement programs that we have, and that's why they're coming here. You see the same thing, by the way, in Europe, where so-called refugees, you know, a refugee, think about the idea. If you're a refugee, that means you're fleeing some kind of intense violence and you're no longer safe at your own country. So the idea is, and basically what the international law is, that the first kind of country you get to that is a signee onto the UN, I believe, that this conflict isn't happening, it's supposed to accept you, which would make sense, right? Like, if you're fleeing a burning house, you just want anywhere to take you in that's not on fire, right? You're not going to say, well, Actually, I don't like your house. Do you have any neighbors with, like, a better cable package, a more comfortable couch? Like, no, beggars can't be choosers, which sounds very callous talking about refugees. I don't mean it that way. I don't mean that they're beggars. I just mean that idiom, the phrase. But, you would be grateful and say, yes, okay, I'm out of this place. If you're saying, no, now I want to move further for economic reasons, well, then you're no longer a refugee. You're an economic migrant, right? So that's the spiel. That's what we're seeing with, like, the caravan and things like that. These aren't refugees, or they would be staying in Mexico or the other places where they're at. Instead, they're saying, no, we want to get to the United States because we have a better economic chance there. Now, by the way, I don't begrudge the individual that's trying to do that. That's fine, right? Like, if I say this all the time, and people think I'm a hypocrite for saying this, but if my neighbor was an illegal immigrant and they're basically they're not committing crazy crimes or anything like that, and they're going to work every day, I wouldn't rat them out, right? But I still would be for us enforcing laws and doing our best to curb illegal immigration and things of that nature. By the same token, if I think we should have speeding laws, but if I know my neighbor speeds all the time, I'm not going to call the cops and say, oh, my neighbor's a speeder. So, that's what I mean by that. So, yeah, legal immigrants, they're not really thrilled about illegal immigration. And where that leads is, like, it's kind of, and you'll hear me harp on this a lot, maybe you could figure out why, because I just told you, like, personal responsibility will be when I run for office. That's basically the lens and the virtue that I follow the most. And so the idea of socialism and identitarian politics and cultural Marxism is anathema to me. It's like the exact opposite. That's why I'm so worried about it. Again, I'm just trying to remind myself to always assume the best of intentions for people I'm discussing this stuff with. So I'm not saying they're crappy people if you believe in socialism or anything like that. But I think that you're horribly wrong, because now we're no longer focusing on the individual. We're focusing on the collective, and that leads to all sorts of problems. But I can get into at a later date with more videos on that. But so yeah, what happens is you then see these weird situations where they'll take polls, which, again, I'm always talking about polls, and then I'm always like, yeah, I don't trust polls, because I'm a hypocrite as well, I guess. But no, you could get kind of a general idea from polls, but you should take the aggregate. You shouldn't look at a specific poll, and a lot of times I still think they're kind of off. But anyways, the media will talk about these polls like, oh my goodness, Trump's approval amongst Hispanic people is like 28-30%. We can't believe it's that high because he's such a racist, right? And the truth is, like, the Hispanic community, particularly the ones that are legal immigrants, probably aren't thrilled about illegal immigration. And the idea that they should be just because they happen to have the same ethnicity does seem a little racist, doesn't it? Right? It's because you run into all kinds of crazy problems like that when you think of people based on their race first. Like, I'm sure if you talk to a legal Hispanic immigrant, right, they would feel more in common with the average American or the average Irish immigrant or the average Asian immigrant, whatever, right, than they would for an illegal immigrant, because they would say, yeah, I busted my butt because I love this country and I did things the right way and it was a great expense to me, and just like this guy from Ireland, just like this guy from China, just like this guy from Nicaragua, whatever, right? Like, yeah, we all went through this process. We share this kind of camaraderie and love for this country, right? Just because I look like this guy that came over illegally doesn't mean that I'm automatically ideologically aligned with that person. And like, why do we do that? Like, and when I say we, like, as a country, we kind of do this, but particularly the left and the Democrats do this a lot. Like, they assume that every race other than white, right, can be lumped together and thinks monolithically. Like, it's absolutely absurd. You saw it with the Kanye West thing, right? Like, you can't be a black person and leave their reservation. You can't do it. They'll come after you harder than they would, like, just an everyday white person or something like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. You would never assume that, like, if I stood up and was like, well, I'm a white community leader, I speak for white people. In fact, people do that. That's like the white national. I said do twice in like 2 minutes. That's awesome, right? But you see these white nationalists like Richard Spencer's a try. Oh, we're speaking for white people, and like almost every white person. And when I say almost every, I mean like well over 90% are like, what? No, shut up. What are you talking about? But they get away with this in other communities. Oh, Hispanics, the number one issue for Hispanics is X, and Hispanics feel this way about Trump, or the black community. Oh, there's my fantasy football score going on. The black community feels X about Trump and things like that. It's like, no. all people of any race are individuals, right? Stop trying to lump them together as this group. So, yeah, you end up, and the last thing I'll say about immigration, because I'm kind of rambling about it, is there's always an attempt to conflate a dislike of illegal immigration with a dislike of immigration in general, and that's just patently false. I haven't seen Trump do that, and I also don't feel that way myself, right? Again, I can't make it more clear. I have the utmost respect for legal immigrants of this country. They deserve to be here. The government deserves to work for them, just like me, who is not an immigrant but is also a citizen of this country. Doesn't matter how you became a citizen. If you are, this government should work for you, period. Even if I disagree with you ideologically, right? Which I'll get into in a second. But yeah, the government should work for you. And that doesn't mean because you're against illegal immigration that you're against this legal immigration. I hate the fact that it keeps getting conflated, and then the coup de grace is then you throw and racism on top of it, which none of that makes sense. So